Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Samantha Rudin-Earls, co-CEO of Rudin and ABNY board member. My grandfather, Lou Rudin, helped found ABNY during the fiscal crisis of the 1970s. My father, Bill, carried the torch of ABNY from 2001 to 2017. And today, it's my honor to represent ABNY for our current chair, Stephen Rubenstein, who could not be here today, but who carries on the ABNY mission and spirit to make New York a better city for all. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the loss of NYPD officer Jonathan Diller, who was killed in the line of duty on Monday in Far Rockaway. As we keep his NYPD colleagues and his family in our thoughts and prayers, please join me in a brief moment of silence. Thank you. As we all know, the ongoing housing crisis is one of our biggest challenges in ensuring New York continues to be the best and brightest city. We know that there must be bold and responsive policies to address the current lack of available housing that New Yorkers can afford, so New York can continue to be a leading global city and place that can both retain its current residents while also continuing to be competitive in attracting new talent. Thankfully, we have many leaders here locally and in Albany who understand these needs and are diligently working to create dynamic solutions. Within Mayor Adams' administration, we are fortunate to have a leader in Maria Torres-Springer, who in her role as Deputy Mayor of Housing, Economic Development, and Workforce brings a holistic view and depth of experience that positions her well to lead in creating solutions to our city's top issues, including housing. Today, we'll hear new updates from her on the progressing City of Yes for Housing Opportunity proposal and new zoning proposals that are being introduced to help unlock new housing. We'll also hear about the administration's ongoing work with our partners in both Albany and DC, who themselves are working to advance new or expanded policies that can assist us in creating and preserving affordable housing here in New York. As we close out Women's History Month, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of the women of our city, state, country, and around the world. Perhaps there is no greater affirmation of the progress of women than in the Adams administration. You can give a round of applause for that. I would like to recognize some of these women leaders here, in addition to Maria with us today. Chief Advisor Ingrid Lewis-Martin, and Senior Advisor Tiffany Raspberry. I would also like to acknowledge Council Member Sylvana Brooks-Powers and Council Member Eric Botcher. Thank you for being here. And it is now my pleasure and honor to welcome Deputy Mayor Maria Torres-Springer.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, there we go. I'm so thrilled to be here this morning. I definitely want to thank Samantha, Stephen Rubenstein, the entire Rudin family, and ABNY for hosting this critical conversation. I really also want to thank all of you for being here this morning on this rainy day. Now, your most precious resource is your time, and that you are choosing to spend that here with each other and with me on issues of housing policy is actually what gives me so much hope that we will not only see our way through this housing crisis, but also forward as a city. Now, like many of you, I've been in this fight for a really long time, through 3 administrations, many economic cycles, and my fair share of crises, natural and man-made. And these days, as the Deputy Mayor for Housing, economic development and workforce, I'm often asked, well, what's more important? Is it boosting supply or is it protecting tenants? Is it getting more federal subsidies or investing city capital dollars? Is it advancing area-wide neighborhood rezonings or is it advancing private applications? Is it about providing more rental subsidies or really advancing more zoning reforms? Is it about converting offices or streamlining environmental review? And my answer to any form of this question is always the same. That answer is yes. Because here's the reality. Our housing crisis has been so long in the making, and the severity of this crisis is now so dire that to change the trajectory of this problem, we need to do everything, everywhere, all at once. Now, if you haven't seen this movie, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenally deranged sci-fi epic, which coincidentally is how I would describe our political and regulatory system for building new homes in this city, state, and frankly, across the country. Now, I'm here with an update, of course, and you'll have to forgive me if we get wonky at times, but these are issues of huge importance. But mostly, I'm here with a plea. I'm here with a plea for each and every one of you that it's really time to act. No more pointing fingers, no more false choices, no more blue ribbon panels or well-researched think pieces about the state of our housing in New York City. We need action at every level, on every facet of the problem. And if that sounds kind of extreme to you, then you must not be talking to the New Yorkers suffering under the weight of our housing crisis, because they expect and demand and need nothing less. And if it sounds unrealistic to you, then I have some very good news. This is New York. And history shows us that when ideas are worth fighting for and when we dig in, New York has an undefeated record. So, I wasn't born yesterday, and as I said, many of us in this room have been working on these problems for a very long time, because our housing crisis, in many ways, is old news. After all, this month, the City Council passed and the mayor just signed into law a bill that formally declares another housing emergency in this city, as they have done for the last 50 years, 50. But here's what's different. First, the crisis has never been more severe. But second, there is a growing consensus, not just about the cause of our crisis, but the solutions. Third, and most importantly, and this is why I'm speaking to you this morning, I believe we have an unprecedented opportunity at all levels of government to fix it. So let's start with the depth of our crisis, because the first step in solving any problem, of course, is being honest about the magnitude of that challenge. So last month, we received the most recent iteration of the city's housing and vacancy survey, and the results were sobering. New York City's vacancy rate has dropped to just 1.4%, the lowest this measurement has been since 1968. Now, that vacancy rate means that if you're a renter looking for a place to live, just a sliver of the homes in New York City are available for rent. And it leads to fierce competition between renters for the few apartments that are on the market, creating bidding wars between desperate New Yorkers that drive rents ever upwards. This ultimately deepens the power imbalance between owners and renters. And even for higher cost homes, the availability is extremely limited, with just over 3% of these units available. Among the lower cost homes, those statistics are even grimmer. Among units renting for under $2,400, the net rental vacancy is below 1%. For the really affordable homes under $1,100, That vacancy rate is 0.39%. That's basically zero. It's little wonder then that virtually all low-income New Yorkers are rent burdened, which means, of course, paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. Now, these statistics encapsulate not only the depth, but the breadth of our crisis. Even middle-class families with two earners and good jobs are stuck in this rat race for the few homes that are available. And the problem, of course, is even more severe for those at the bottom of our economic ladder, increasing the city's wealth gap and deepening racial disparities. This creates a situation where working-class families compete not only with each other when looking for a small stock of available homes, but also with higher-income New Yorkers priced out of their high-cost neighborhoods. Now, our problem here in New York is especially profound, but it is also just one exhibit in a lengthy indictment of our country's approach to housing. Today in the US, we are 6.8 million homes short of what is needed to meet our current housing needs. And a minimum wage worker can afford a one-bedroom rental in only 7% of counties nationwide. But of course, this is not just the story of numbers. It is a story of people. The human cost is everywhere. I see it in the unfathomable decisions that New Yorkers have to make about whether to pay rent or to eat, to keep a roof over their heads or get needed medicine. I see it in the close to the 120,000 New Yorkers, including more than 64,000 migrants, who will sleep in shelters tonight here in our city, one of the wealthiest cities in the world. I hear it in the despair of parents with children growing up in homes that are surrounded by mold, in the families uprooted with just a few weeks' notice from their homes, in the couples who've done everything right in our city, who've saved up for years to buy a home just to see those dreams go up in smoke against a competing all-cash offer. And I see it in the communities of color who for generations have been unable to own their homes in the neighborhoods that they grew up in. Perhaps worst of all, I see it in the flight of Black New Yorkers from our city, in the faces that are missing from our streets and our schools, and the harrowing prospect that if we do nothing, New York may never look the same. Now, for some time, we've been grasping for an explanation of how we got here. Is this just the unavoidable downside of our success, of being a city where everyone wants to live? Is it because we're the center of commerce and culture? Is it our natural environment? The upshot of being a city of islands where land is relatively scarce? Now, you've probably heard it all, and there's a kernel of truth to each. Slowly but surely, however, I hope you're also hearing something else, a growing consensus, even in unexpected quarters, that at the root of our housing crisis is a simple truth. We have not built enough homes to keep up with demand. Now, this isn't a theory, it's a fact. For more than 40 years, job growth has outpaced housing growth. In just the last decade, we added 800,000 jobs and just 200,000 homes. That imbalance between supply and demand has caused prices to skyrocket, not just here, but virtually everywhere in America where we have failed to build. To see the cause and effect, we just have to look at cities, actually, that are building housing. They are the ones keeping housing costs under control. In Minneapolis, for example, rents increased by just 1% between 2017 and 2022 because their city enacted reforms, including zoning changes, that allowed the housing stock to grow by 12% over that same period. It's no surprise, then, that study after study shows increasing the supply of housing lowers the rent. There is simply no ambiguity in the empirical literature. Our failure to build homes is at the core of our housing crisis. Now, why did this slow to a crawl? Now, that question, that's not a mystery either. We spent decades enacting policy after policy that makes it harder to build. Now, some of these policies, they go way back. Like in 1961, when we enacted a sweeping overhaul of our zoning that limited growth in favor of a suburban car-dependent vision for our city. And let's be honest, many of those who pushed for the 1961 zoning resolution did so with the express aim of promoting racial segregation. But also, let me be clear, some of the policies that are in our way are of a much more recent vintage. So per local law, the Department of City Planning recently completed an analysis of 15 city-enacted rezonings from 2009. And this morning, I'm sharing with all of you for the first time what that analysis reveals. The headline is that it offers a pretty telling snapshot of our city's planning politics in the 2000s. Outer borough neighborhoods, especially but not limited to those with higher incomes and whiter populations, were downzoned, significantly reducing housing production and increasing pressure elsewhere in the city. Indeed, of the 7 rezonings in low-density neighborhoods, 5 saw a reduction in housing built after the rezoning, while the other 2 were so geographically small they had no discernible effect one way or the other. In other words, as recently as 15 years ago, as the demand to live in our great city continued to rise, we did the opposite of what we should have. We made it harder to build housing. On the other hand, City Planning's report shows that where we did open up opportunities for new housing in 2009, we did so in places where residents were more likely to be Black or lower income. But that happened before the help of important tools like mandatory inclusionary housing to ensure that new development delivered permanent affordability. So the consequences of this era continue to shape present-day New York. But our problems go beyond zoning. We have, over the years, and many times with good intentions, created a toxic brew of Kafkaesque regulations and government disinvestment. Amid political hand-wringing, even common sense tools have become political footballs. And unfortunately, NIMBYism has become a bipartisan disposition. Now, maybe there was a time when all of this was forgivable, when we could chalk it up to just our routine politics, when solutions to our crisis maybe were less clear, or when we could afford to choose fear over facts, politics over progress. But we can't any longer. And the mission is really clear. We have to move from a broken system defined by that type of finger pointing and pearl clutching about what we need to do to build housing and build affordable housing in this city, to one that unapologetically supports the foundations of a decent and secure life. And I know that we can, because at this very moment, we have this once-in-a-generation opportunity with leaders at the city, state, and federal level to finally bend the curve on our housing crisis. And that, of course, is by doing everything, everywhere, all at once. You're gonna say that all day long. It's gonna be stuck in your head, I promise you. So it starts with the city. When Mayor Adams came into office, we set down a marker. We need to build 500,000 homes over the course of the next decade. And he charged the entire administration with a particular set of mandates. Don't worry about the politics, just cut through the red tape, use every tool, stretch every dollar. And so some examples. In the mayor's Get Stuff Built plan, we identified 111 ways to get development done faster, cheaper, and smarter. And we've already implemented 31 of those. One of the biggest moves is that we have an initiative called the Green Fast Track, which is a proposal that streamlines environmental review for small and medium-sized residential developments. And so by cutting 2 years and $100,000 in costs for new housing, the Green Fast Track will deliver sustainable housing faster, which is a win, of course, for the environment and for housing. To make sure that red tape doesn't get in the way of turning vacant offices into homes, we launched an office conversion accelerator. More than 50 buildings have reached out for support that will help create more than 2,000 homes over the course of the next 12 months alone. We also paid special attention to the tens of thousands of 421A units that are at risk of failing to meet a critical June 2026 deadline for completion. And our Housing at Risk Task Force, charged with helping these projects, is now working to get over 17,000 units of housing completed on time. On the affordable housing front, in 2023, we broke records for production, creating the most new homes, the most supportive homes, the most homes for the formerly homeless. And we currently have area-wide rezonings and neighborhood plans in all 5 boroughs, along the new stations, Bronx Metro North, Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, Midtown South, in Manhattan, thank you very much, Councilmember Botcher, Jamaica, Long Island City in Queens, Richmond Terrace on Staten Island, and we're aggressively using city-owned land to help move the needle on this crisis through our 24 in 24 initiative, which the mayor announced in the last State of the City, where we committed to advancing 24 housing projects on public land in this calendar year of 2024. And today I'm happy to announce that we're ahead of schedule. Only 3 months into the year, we've already launched 10 public sites across all 5 boroughs, because it is just crystal clear to us that we have to do everything. Not just make building faster and cheaper, not just harness private investment, not just transform sites in our control, or even just set records for publicly financed production. We have to do all of it. This year, of course, we are entering a crucial phase in these efforts as the mayor's City of Yes for Housing Opportunity Plan enters public review. Let there be no doubt that City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, it's mission critical. It is the single biggest pro-housing reform in the history of the city's zoning resolution, and arguably the most significant action we can take to change the trajectory of our housing crisis. Now, the concept behind City of Yes is simple. We need to build a lot more housing, but gone are the days where we ask just a few neighborhoods to carry the load for the whole city, while others fail to contribute at all. Evidenced by the fact that if you look at the numbers, in the last decade, 9 out of the city's 59 community districts provided more housing than the other 50 combined. Instead, we need every community to do its part. And if we add a little bit more housing to every neighborhood, we know that we can collectively make a big impact. To start, we're going to make it legal once again to build modest apartment buildings in much of the city. Now, small apartment buildings are the heart of New York City. They're everywhere. They're the workhorse for affordability. They were once the staple of production. But along the way, we made it illegal to build them in much of the outer boroughs. This should change, and we must do it in a thoughtful way that recognizes that Bensonhurst isn't and won't ever be Manhattan. Now, by allowing residential above shops on commercial corridors, by encouraging transit-oriented development, by unlocking the potential of campuses, we know we can build modest apartment buildings again. It's also past time we gave homeowners the freedom to create small apartments for family members or caregivers, or earn a bit of income. Now, the hunger among homeowners to create accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, is staggering. Recently, the city launched a pilot program to help homeowners build these types of units, and we received 2,000 applications in just 1 week. But outdated roadblocks in zoning continue to hold homeowners back, and we will fix this. We can also join cities across the country in ending parking mandates, destructive rules that force New Yorkers to build parking that they don't want. Right now, every 2 parking spots that are added to a new build takes up space for 1 studio apartment. And wherever it's required, parking drives up the cost to rent or purchase a home. Now, surely, the city with the best public transportation system in the country can join places like Raleigh, Nashville, San Jose, no offense to San Jose, even San Jose, in getting rid of outdated parking mandates written in the era of Robert Moses. We also need to do more in higher density neighborhoods, like parts of Manhattan that have become all but inaccessible to working families. In these parts of the city, we're going to allow buildings to get 20% bigger if and only if they use that space to deliver permanent, affordable housing. We're going to make it easier for outdated office space to convert to residential, revitalizing our business districts and delivering housing exactly where we need it most, near jobs and transit. And our plan will also legalize different housing types, like shared housing and smaller apartments that appeal to young people just starting their careers or seniors who want to downsize. And we're taking an additional bold step. Another thing I'm happy to share with this audience for the first time. So as you know, at the state level, the outdated floor area ratio cap, or FAR cap, also enacted in 1961, strictly limits residential density in New York City. Now, this rule makes it harder to build new housing, especially affordable housing, exactly where it should be built, in transit and job-rich Manhattan. Now, some say they would support the repeal of the FAR cap if we can promise that it will result in real, permanent, affordable housing. And so in the City of Yes, we're going to do just that. We're going to create 2 new residential districts, R11 and R12, that can only be used in conjunction with mandatory inclusionary housing. Now, for those of you who may not immediately get giddy at the prospect of new residential zoning districts, let me make all of this plain. In our city, residential zoning districts allow for a certain amount of residential square footage. The rule sets a cap on the amount of housing you can build based on the size of the lot. An FAR of 5 means you can build 5 times the size of the lot. An FAR of 10 means you can build 10 times. Right now, because of that cap, that state cap, the most housing we can allow is 12 times the size of the lot, even though we routinely allow office buildings to be much denser, up to 20 times the size of the lot. But once the cap is lifted, we can allow more than 12. And in our proposal that I just mentioned, in these new residential zoning districts, we're going to enable 15 and 18. Densities that are already present in much of the city, but only in buildings built before 1961. So to start, the districts will just live in the zoning code. They won't apply anywhere until both the FAR cap is repealed by the state and we go through our local process to apply them in any given neighborhood. But if Albany does act, we're going to have a head start, and we'll be that much closer to delivering significant amounts of new housing and new affordable housing in many parts of our city. So everything in the City of Yes package, from affordable housing bonuses to empowering homeowners, all of this is within our control. And in just 2 weeks, the Department of City Planning will be releasing the full text for these reforms. And if the City Council enacts it in full later this year, I really do believe that we will have done more to unlock housing production than any other policy in recent memory. And I believe we can get this done. And it's just not me saying that. I get paid to say that. I believe we can get it done because there's a growing chorus of organizations who are really calling for action. Just recently, the New York Housing Conference brought together over 100 organizations that serve New Yorkers to support the City of Yes for housing opportunity. And support for more action through city and state is growing. And today, another thing I'm happy to share is that we have another 100 community-based organizations, MWBE developers, faith-based organizations who have joined this chorus. From the Chinatown Partnership to Homeless Services United to Robin Hood to the New York Real Estate Chamber, These organizations that serve New Yorkers from every walk of life, they are joining houses of worship, employers, civic leaders, labor leaders, elected officials, grassroots organizations, climate activists, small businesses, and they're all saying with one voice that we need citywide solutions to build housing in every neighborhood, and that City of Yes is the right plan to make that a reality. Now, the FAR cap repeal isn't the only thing we need from Albany this year, because as much as the city can do on its own, there are critical tools that only Albany can unlock. The good news is that the momentum for housing action this session is building to a crescendo. Now, we have here too a growing coalition of leaders who are calling for a housing package to pass in the budget. And I know that with leaders like Governor Hochul, our majority leader, our speaker, all of whom understand the urgency of this crisis, that we can close this deal. We in the Adams administration, we've been exceedingly clear. We've been a broken record about what we need from Albany. We need Albany to pass a new tax incentive to spur new homes, because since 2014, more than 80% of the buildings with affordable housing built in the city's high-cost neighborhoods, for example, they relied on these as-of-right tax incentives. That's more than 80%. But in recent years, our state hasn't had that type of as-of-right tax program at all. And the result is that new construction of multifamily rental is at a standstill, and at a moment exactly when we can least afford it. A new program can deliver permanent and deeper affordability, better labor standards, stronger enforcement to protect tenants and taxpayers. And the only thing we can't do is end this session without that incentive. We also need an incentive to ensure that office conversions deliver affordable housing, because we can't lose the opportunity to add affordable homes in places like Midtown and downtown Manhattan that badly need it. And we need Albany to give the city the authority to legalize basement and cellar apartments so we can protect the health and the safety of tenants that are already living in unregulated units across the country. We simply cannot wait for another Hurricane Ida to take the lives of New Yorkers living in basements and cellars. And if you agree, now is the time to get loud. So I just spent the last 2 days in Albany, and all sides are in deep discussion and deep negotiation. I think we're at the 1 or 2 yard line in Albany action, which in the world of Albany is like a lifetime. And so here's my plea again. Let's make the right call. Let's actually score a win for New Yorkers. Let us not fumble this ball at the 1 yard line. But we also need the federal government to step in. But with President Biden, our majority leader, of course, and Chuck Schumer, our leader Jeffries, I know that we have a team that understands both the housing crisis and what New York City needs. And in the next few weeks, Washington also has a chance to significantly expand New York's ability to deliver new housing. The Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, or LIHTC, is the national government's leading tool to finance the development of affordable housing. Since it was created in the 80s, it's helped finance close to 4 million homes. And before Congress right now is a tax package that, if enacted, could unlock nearly $1.4 billion more in LIHTC equity in New York City and billions more nationwide. And 2 reforms are particularly salient. The first would restore an expired 12.5% increase in the amount of credits available to us. The second would lower the program's bond financing threshold from 50 to 30%, and that basically allows us to use our resources more effectively. Combined, the 2 reforms would allow us to deliver an additional 4,400 homes in just New York City. So the demand is there, the land is there, the will is there. We just need more resources to build. Now, there are, of course, many, many, many issues that divide our nation. But these that I just talked about, these tax changes, this expansion of LIHTC, they actually have extraordinary bipartisan support, having passed the House in a 357 to 70 vote. And now it's time for the Senate to act. And so here again is my plea. I would like for you to join me in calling on Congress to not fumble this ball, to score again here, not just for New Yorkers, but for Americans across the country. So that's the plan. Do everything, everywhere, all at once. Easy, right? Not exactly, but I really believe that the wind is at our backs, especially now that we have New Yorkers across the political spectrum speaking up in support of the need to build more housing in our city. This new generation of New Yorkers, they're sending a message that every community has a responsibility to build quality homes and welcome new neighbors, and that those who are already well-housed do not have a right to deny others that same opportunity. But they can't do it alone, and that's where all of you come in. There is considerable power in this room. You get to choose what issues are worth fighting for, and I really hope that you choose this one. Now, I understand that what we're asking from you and from all New Yorkers is probably more than we've asked before. We're asking for an openness to doing things differently. We're asking for a willingness to embrace some change. We're asking for the readiness to meet the scale of this challenge. We're asking for just a little bit more courage to rise above our routine politics. And this will take leadership from every person in this room and everyone in all of your contacts in your phones, because the state of our housing will only ever be as good as the quality of the leaders that we have. Because after all, a stream cannot rise above its source. But I am 100% convinced that our ability to solve this crisis, to build new homes, to provide the foundations of a decent, secure life again, that this will be the defining task of this generation. Because if we want to live in a city where children don't have to worry where they are sleeping at night, where older New Yorkers don't have to fear growing old without dignity or warmth, where working class people, where our city's dreamers and doers and strivers can live the richer, larger lives that they deserve, then we need to deliver the housing that underpins it all. And that is why we are determined to solve this crisis the only way that counts, and that is together. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for your inspiring words, for fighting the good fight. We're going to get loud with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Okay.